Okay, back again. If this is for metals and glass 1 stained glass project, this is really your last step of the project, and you're gonna solder your pieces of glass together. You're gonna hear a lot of words that sound familiar from when we learned how to solder metal, and it is similar, but the pieces look different. So your actual solder that we're using for this project looks like this. It's in a spool. Whoops, I just bumped my camera. And you're gonna use it, you're gonna actually like hold it and drag it across the copper tape on your piece. We also have a soldering iron. This is what's gonna heat your solder up, and you're gonna use it simultaneously. You can see that, you're gonna use this tip. I have my pieces of glass set on a piece of cardboard. I had this dinosaur here, fell off my camera, so I had it there. But you're gonna find yourself a piece of cardboard, and you're gonna set your glass up the way that you want it to look, and then you're gonna use thumbtacks, right, little tacks to tack everything in place. So obviously you're gonna have more pieces than I have here, but what I would recommend is that you just tack the edges. Like if you have one tack at every spot, it's probably fine. And you can see if stuff is too tight or too loose, right? You can adjust or add more or less that way. And maybe even before you tack it, although if you tack it first, I don't think that should be too big of a deal. You have to flux your metal. And again, you'll probably remember that from when you learned how to solder metal. Oops, I don't have that right next to me. The flux that we're using is in this, it's like clear liquid. This is my least favorite material to use in all of the materials that I teach. I don't know why this flux is like greasy and slimy at the same time, and it gets all over everything and it's kind of gross. So you paint that on the metal with a paintbrush. I didn't show you how to do that because it has to dry, and I needed it to dry to be part of this, but there's no right or wrong. The thinner you put it on, the faster it's going to dry and the faster you can solder, so I would recommend putting it on thin. It does not matter if you get it on the glass because we will clean off the glass at the end of it, okay? So you'll take some time, you'll paint that on all of your copper tape, and then you're going to take, which way do I do this? I'm going to take the soldering iron in my dominant hand, which is my right hand, and I'm going to take the solder in my left hand, and essentially I'm going to touch the tip of the soldering iron to the solder while I drag it across the copper tape. And we're going to do it all at the same time. Hello. People are knocking on my window and I'm not being distracted. So you're going to take it and drag it down your copper tape. If you get a little puddle of it, which I don't really have, but you can kind of see, like if it pools up somewhere, you can actually go across with just the iron then and drag it around. So if you have a lot of solder on there, you can kind of manipulate that too. Okay, now you can see already that the tacks are getting in the way, so I'm just going to try to move in a way that works for me. I'm going to get done what I can. Oops, if your piece sticks, just heat it up. And then when I have enough soldered, I can remove some of those tacks. Okay, so I think this looks like a good start. So I'm going to take off, like very carefully, all of this is very hot. I'm going to take off that piece, and I'm going to kind of see if I can just drag that solder around. I'm going to take off that tack, and again I have a little bit of a bubble there, so I can just drag that down. Okay, so you can kind of work as you go. You do want to keep a couple of thumbtacks there because you're going to see it slide, right, almost immediately. So it just becomes a little bit easier if you have something to push against. You got to be creative. Okay, and then you can kind of go through and do the edges. Then, once you have the entire thing done, and like I said, if you have bumps and stuff in here and you don't like the way it looks, take some time with just your iron and even it all out. the solder doesn't stick to the glass, so that'll all be fine and can be cleaned up later. And then once it's cool, you could potentially flip it over. Mine's not cool. We'll just use some tools. Don't do this. This is a bad idea. We're flipping it over, and I have already fluxed the back side as well. So then I can go through on the back side and either just clean things up or go through with my solder and my iron and make everything look nice. The biggest thing, I mean, this again is just like metal, soldering metal. If yours isn't sticking and you come and find me and ask me why, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, did you flux the copper? That's probably why it's not working, and it doesn't mean that you didn't do it. Maybe it wiped off, maybe it's, you didn't do a thick enough coat, something like that. But that's usually the reason why it's not working. On occasion, we have soldering irons that do not heat up and they're broken, so that could be the reason too. But most likely it's because you didn't flux or the flux didn't stick. Okay, we also have these little stands for your soldering iron to sit on. Please use them. We had a little incident when, I don't know if you remember when we had that fire a couple years ago, last year, I don't know when it was, and when we got back, somebody left their soldering iron on the table, and there's a burn mark on one of the tables now. So please use those stands. Please make sure that they're unplugged at the end of the class period. I don't know how well you can see this, and this is my back side, because there's a nice glare there. But when you're all done, it doesn't look like super nice and pristine and perfect because there's some flux on here and there's some like ash residue. Okay, so it doesn't look as nice as it could look. When this cools off and dries, I would like you to wash it in the sink, right, with soap and water, very carefully, and then also we're going to use some Windex. Actually, Dawn dish soap should work too. If we have Dawn dish soap in here, I would just wash it off with that. If we can find some Windex, then you can clean up your glass really well too. But that's the last step for this project. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you soon.